And I want to talk about the bullshit argument that Palantir has made that it doesn't actually surveil anyone, that it's not the one collecting this information. That's a little bit like the scientists in the Manhattan Project or Oppenheimer saying, I'm not responsible for the atomic bomb because I didn't mine the uranium. So I noticed this week that people were watching a video I did about 3 months ago on Palantir, which was a deep dive on its products, its services, how it works, what it does, what it claims not to do, which I'll dive into a little bit more here in a second. That video popped up presumably because a story came out that showed Palantir is being given data that has Social Security records or Medicaid records. They're taking that data and then they're building a predictive model using their software to map potential targets for ICE to go and apprehend. So they think these folks are illegal immigrants or they have a high probability of being illegal immigrants. And so now they're telling ICE which doors to knock on. This long-standing belief that Palantir was working in a very limited capacity or in a very specific capacity for the federal government, that has now come to light that is much more extensive than most people understand or understood. When I put out the original video, I mentioned there's a $30 million, I believe annualized, contract between Palantir and DHS for some very specific mapping and predictive technologies. Now they're aggregating Medicaid records and applying what they call a confidence score to those records to point ICE toward likely addresses where illegal immigrants may be. They call that platform ELITE. I don't know if that stands for anything. I don't really care. That means that ICE now has direct access to Medicaid records of citizens. They are officially looking at your shit, and that's now become public information. That public disclosure says that through a data sharing agreement, DHS now has tens of millions of Medicaid records. And that, to me, should piss you off that they have access to this, not just because they're now officially spying on citizens or using their predictive models to target illegal immigrants. It also means that they're guessing and they might be wrong. If you look at Medicaid records, they don't actually contain definitive information about immigration status. It's not actually said there if somebody has, is on a green card or if they're on a visa. It just doesn't differentiate that stuff. So the government is relying on Palantir to guess. And in order for them to guess, they need to look at all of it. So this whole tens of millions of records, I think we can all just assume it's all of the fucking records, to be honest with you. And that, again, should probably piss you off. So Palantir built a couple of different custom products just for ICE and DHS. I think the biggest one, or the overarching operating system that they have built for them, is literally called Immigration OS, or Immigration Operating System. It's a newer AI-enabled surveillance and case management layer built on top of ICM under a multi-year $30 million contract designed to give near real-time visibility into immigrants' status and movements and to prioritize targets for enforcement. Immigrants' status and movements. It's tracking people, where they go, how long they're there, how often they go there. And then obviously ICE then takes that and says, well, that means I have a good chance of showing up to one of those places, like where they work, where they go to church, if they go to the hospital, their doctor's office, whatever the case may be, and have a high degree of confidence, I'm gonna find them. The idea that there is a software out there that is accessing the public's information to create near real-time visibility into immigrants' movements also means that they're tracking non-immigrants, that they're tracking non-illegals, that they're tracking citizens' movements, because they can't be sure they're right. They have incomplete data. They're guessing. They have a confidence score. And I want to talk about the bullshit argument that Palantir has made time and time again, that it doesn't actually surveil anyone, that it's not the one collecting this information. That's a little bit like the scientists in the Manhattan Project or Oppenheimer saying, I'm not responsible for the atomic bomb because I didn't mine the uranium. That data, that video, those records don't really mean anything in the abstract. They don't mean anything at volume. They only mean something after Palantir takes it, applies its predictive modeling, and then gives back specific targets down to the address level to Customs and Enforcement, to DHS. The uranium that came out of the ground in and of itself is pretty unremarkable until you apply the science around atomic detonation. And at the end of the day, this is a distinction without a difference. Just because you weren't filming that person, just because you didn't receive directly those records through some portal or some other government agency, doesn't mean you don't still get it, and doesn't mean you aren't weaponizing it once you put your software to work on those data sets. Those data sets are useless until Palantir applies its proprietary software and technologies that then becomes a targeting exercise. But in order to get there, they have to look at everybody, and then they have to guess, and then they have to hope they're right. And we have reason to believe this is true just based on how the company itself is responding to push back against a narrative that they're spying on the US population, that they're not doing anything wrong, that they're trying to be helpful, that they're trying to deliver justice and peace. Internally, their own employees are pushing back really hard, especially after Alex Preddy's death in Minnesota. So Yahoo News ran this story about that internal debate, that internal discord that was starting to bubble up in Palantir. Now, there have been past stories about Palantir employees pushing back internally or asking questions internally of their management, of their leadership about, are we the good guys here? So one of the employees at Palantir that was using an internal Slack channel that employees use to talk to each other or Slack back and forth, wrote, quote, "In my opinion, ICE are the bad guys. I'm not proud that the company I enjoy so much working for is part of this. Thinking pragmatically, is the reputational damage we're taking for being associated with them worth it? What if the next administration will be Democratic and they cut all contracts with us?" And ended that statement with, quote, "We need an understanding of our involvement here," end quote. But then it started to turn a little bit more action-oriented with one employee saying, quote, "Can Palantir put any pressure on ICE at all? I've read stories about folks rounded up who were seeking asylum with no order to leave the country, no criminal record, and consistently check in with authorities. Literally no reason to be rounded up. Surely we aren't helping to do that, question mark, end quote. Welcome to the fucking party. Have you not been paying attention? Of course you're responsible for that. Of course you've played a role in that. As an employee of a company that is actively involved in a $30 million contract with DHS to do exactly that. Apparently they kept pushing, or the employees kept pushing some of the leadership, some of the higher up at Palantir to get some answers about what exactly it is that they do for ICE and their role in the way that ICE is operating on the ground. And they weren't really getting very far. Some of the executives were saying things like, quote, "Palantir doesn't take the position of policing the use of our platform for every workflow," end quote. And then, according to Yahoo, hand waved aside concerns of its tech being abused because there would always be, quote, "bad apples." I went into this in the long form video. Again, I will link that to this video. And I said, that may be the smoking gun of all of it, because Palantir is saying, we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. We can't monitor how this is used. Once we give them the proverbial bullets, I can't control how they shoot those bullets. And worse, claim no responsibility for how they use the technology. Yahoo also wrote, one employee also confronted the same executive about a video of an ICE agent scanning an onlooker's car and telling them that they've been added to a, quote, database that marks them as a domestic terrorist. That employee demanded to know if Palantir was behind the database, which the executive denied. So I think for a lot of people, this is the first time they're actually realizing that a company like Palantir even exists, and more upsetting, what Palantir can do with the data it's being provided by our own government. I think there are some undeniable truths here. They are collecting data on citizens. They are not limited to just illegal immigrants. They are targeting everyone based off of a predictive model and a confidence score, which means there are huge margins for error in that, because the data that is feeding those confidence scores don't contain the information you need to have any confidence. This should make everybody very angry, and at the bare minimum, everyone more aware that our government has used an AI platform in the form of Palantir to create a surveillance state on a level we've never seen in the United States before. So I hope you get a chance to check out the longer video, the deeper dive, the one that honestly is a little bit more dispassionate than this one. I'm struggling right now. I'll be honest with you. I'm struggling with Alex Preddy's death. I'm struggling with the role of technology in the way that DHS and ICE is conducting business. I'm struggling with the idea that AI, for all of the benefit it can create, is being deployed in a way that is so inhumane, that is so reckless, and so devoid of principle in a way that makes me angry. It makes me upset. It makes me sad that this is where we are, that this is what we've done or are doing with this technology. And then just to put the icing on the cake, that we're paying Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, and his company $30 million a year to do this. I hope this was helpful. I hope you check out the full episode. Thanks so much. See you next time.